Yeah.
I struggled
This
just
one's
a little.
not complicated, but there's so much in it. Trying to make sense of it and put it into
It's
categories so you can.
yes. Yes.
So, but welcome,
So
ladies. Thank you for joining us.
yes. If you guys don't know Stephanie, please look her up on Facebook. She has a Facebook page. Please tell us about that so that they can find you.
Yeah. I just created I took an old one and renamed it to Discovering Our Hebrew Roots. And some of my friends may be on here. Some of the people I know from that website and or Facebook group. But yeah, so I kind of took all the things because I do a podcast. I do some other teaching on Messianic Lamb Network. So I decided I needed a name that encompassed everything that I'm kind of doing. So that was a way, and including this, so I've advertised this over there too. So yeah,
Yes.
stay keep
Yes.
busy.
Yes. It sounds like it. I wanted to share something with you ladies. So we have, for those of you who don't know, we used to have a platform that was called the Rooted Cafe, and we had hours, hundreds and hundreds of hours of teaching.
800 you told me once.
Yeah, I think it's more than that, but
Okay.
anyway, we'll see. I
Lots.
right. I'm going to share my screen with you because I want you to see how easy it is that you're not going to go in there and go 800 videos. How do I choose? It's not like that at all. So let me go in
Mhm.
here and share my screen with you so you can see. So this is my login, right? And I type in the Rooted Cafe to find it.
Mhm.
Here's the Rooted Cafe page. I'm going to go to that page. I'm going to click on playlists. Now, look, it's organized according to different topics, different speakers. You can
Awesome.
find all the things in here.
That's
So
awesome.
don't be intimidated by us telling you how many hours of teaching. Look, there's previous years portion teachings that are talking about some really amazing things. As I was studying for this, I came across some things that I was like, oh, I remember when Brenda said this about that, and oh, so good.
Mm.
So prior years teachings are really good too. So there's lots to see here, but it is organized. You can also search for a specific person if you're looking for a specific person when you just click here. So I hope that that helps you guys
Mm.
some and that you're not intimidated by it. Please go check it out.
It helps me because I was a bit intimidated, so it helps me. I can tell you that.
It can be very intimidating when you've got all that
Yeah,
content in one place.
because I wanted to find some things that Miriam Stallsworth had done, and I'm like, I put it in like Rooted Cafe Miriam Stallsworth, and it's like I didn't get it. I didn't get what I wanted, and so
Right.
now I realize you go into playlists and
Yes, and the
makes sense.
cafe is spelled with a K.
Yes,
That'll throw you a little too if you don't know.
yes.
So, before we kind of dive into the scriptures today, I do want to bring up one topic and just make sure that we address it before we get started. If you read the scriptures in Exodus for today,
Mhm.
it talks a lot about slaves. And so that is such a terrible, if I could use that term, word these days for
It's a
people.
trigger word, right?
Yes, and they just people don't like it. So I want to make sure that we're clear that everybody understands that this word is actually a servant. And you're like, how is that different? Well, it's getting that negative connotation out of your mind so that you're not thinking, oh, slavery. It's
Hmm.
been so talked about and so beaten down and all of those things. So we just want you to have that negative connotation out of your mind. This isn't about slavery, it's about servants and the ways that these servants were put into service. Sometimes were not in the best circumstances, but it was a
Right.
way that their family could be saved
Hmm. Taken
financially
care
or
of,
something,
right?
right?
And some went willingly into servanthood.
Yes, they
So
did.
they would even choose to stay with this master because they were treated well and they knew they had food and care. They had their basic needs being met, so they gladly stayed. So
Yes,
where
they made that choice.
slavery is usually stealing, right? It's taking out, taking away from your situation unwillingly and being forced. And most of
Yes,
these people were not forced.
exactly.
So,
Exactly. So we just wanted to clear that up before we started talking about everything else.
mm-hmm,
And I think Stephanie wants to kind of go back a little bit so that we can get some context for what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going
mm-hmm.
to let you jump in and do that.
Okay. So in last week's portion, it covered chapters 19, Exodus 19 and 20, of course, and the 10 commandments. But I was reminded, of course, when reading some verses in 19, um it's basically, if you start in verse 5, now therefore you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. And that actually goes along with um First Peter 2:9. He uses possession, he uses priesthood and holy nation. So those phrases now we see in the New Testament for the same reason. But he's basically telling us here that all these laws that we see in 20, 21, 22, 23 are because we are in a priesthood, because we are a holy nation, because we serve the God of the universe, the creator of all things, that there's reasons we do what we do, and there's reasons we follow him. We kind of have, and even, and I can't help but bring in spirit and in truth, right? Because it's both.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
it's both truth, and we follow in the spirit of the law, and we follow in the truth of the law.
Well,
So,
and it's telling us how to act. It's
hmm,
giving us some practical things. Now, we
hmm,
don't understand all of this because we are
right?
so far removed from the agricultural aspect
Yes.
of what we're looking at and from the ancient Near East that
Hmm,
we don't necessarily understand it in the way it was intended for all of those
hmm,
things. We can read it literally, but then we go, but what does that mean? Because I don't have an ox and my neighbor isn't dead. So, you
But
know?
isn't it cool? Because think, okay, again, I love the parallels of bringing Old and New Testaments together, because they're not meant to be separate. One's, if you know who Chad Bird is, which I like following him, I like his teachings, but he doesn't teach. He's not a Torah person, but yet there's lots of things he teaches that explain the Old Testament very well. But my point is that, when you look at the things that Jesus said in the New Testament, and then you see that they're all coming, of course, from the Old. And we can't help but think, when Jesus said, what are the two greatest commandments? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and might, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, these these laws about restitution, there at the end of 21, they're all of them are teaching us how to treat our neighbor. And Jesus said, who is your neighbor? I mean, it all kind of goes together. Who is our
Right.
neighbor? It's anybody. It's everyone that we have any kind of relationship with, or even another human being that needs our help. So it's how to
Yes.
treat people. That's the second
Yes.
greatest commandment, how to love people, and he's telling us how to treat them.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes just because it doesn't apply to our circumstances today doesn't mean that it's not
Right.
applicable in some ways. And it doesn't mean that it can't
Mhm.
speak into our lives
Right.
where he's like, listen, I really want you to be good.
Hmm.
So let's do these things.
Yeah.
Let's follow these standards.
Yeah.
Let's be a light. Let's
Hmm.
be a walking Torah.
Hmm.
Let's
And
be
let's
what
care.
people can see. Yes.
Let's care about
Oh,
each other and each other's belongings. You
yes.
know, I mean, it's about, like, I mean, it's something as easy as, donkey or ox. They fall in a hole. Help them.
Right.
Help your neighbor get their donkey out. Help your neighbor get their ox out. And I think of, and I'm not trying to go off on a tangent. It's just that these things go through my head when I study these kinds of scriptures,
Yeah.
and I think I follow, like, in Stowe, Ohio. There's a lost and found pets, and often some of the pets that get lost are from pet keepers, somebody who's taking care of somebody else's animal. We have animals, we have sheep and ducks and chickens and stuff. And whenever somebody we have to get somebody to take care of them, we're putting all of our animals care into the hands of somebody who might not know them like we do.
Right.
And we count on them to take care of them. We don't want to come home to dead animals. And God addresses those kinds of things. You're taking care of your neighbor's animal. You kill that animal on your watch, you need to make restitution, you know.
Yeah.
And so there's very real applicable thing, applicable, what's the word?
Applicable.
Yeah, thank you. What she said, yeah. So those those can still, you may not own a donkey, but maybe you own a dog or a bird or a cat,
Right.
and you still need to care for other people's belongings as if it were
Well, and it
yours.
was funny because when I was reading it and I was like, I don't relate to this. I mean, can I on some level? Sure. But I was like, I don't relate to this. And so I just felt like the Holy Spirit was kind of like, well, what if that ox was a car?
Hmm.
What if that was your car? What if all these bad things
Yeah,
happened or somebody didn't take care of it
right.
or they wrecked it? And, it's that kind of a
Yeah,
put it into a modern term where we can kind
yeah.
of grasp it a little bit better. It's still not
Mhm.
equivalent, but
Right.
it just
But
kind of gives us a better idea.
yeah, it does help us understand because I mean, my husband's loaned out tools and not gotten those tools back in the
Mhm.
same condition he loaned them.
Right.
And that is discouraging. It makes you not want to loan things out to people when they don't return them, or if they chip or break, they don't go and have it fixed, so I think it applies in that way. We may not have a donkey, we may not have a sheep, but we do have other things that we've paid money for that belong to us and we've cared for, and then somebody else doesn't. So but it also is on our side. We have to remember that we
Yes.
have to take care of other people's property that they may loan us. And God spells those things out in their words and from their time, but it still applies to, yeah, like you said, that's excellent. Just replace it with something you've paid a lot of money for or put a lot of value in.
Right. I think we forget sometimes when we're reading this. For me, as I was reading through it, I was just thinking, it feels so heavy and just so,
Yeah.
but really it's teaching me. It's not about
Mhm.
judging others and what they're doing. It's telling
Right.
me how I'm supposed to be.
Right. How we act, how we treat others. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Mm. And
We
sometimes we
take it to
forget.
heart
Yes.
because how often have we sat, in a service of, congregation, and something comes up about marriage, and you're like telling your spouse, like, yeah, yeah, are you hearing this? And the Lord's like, no, are you hearing?
Right.
So,
Yeah, we forget to look at ourselves sometimes.
hmm.
We're always looking at others and being like, "Yeah, you, did you see this?"
Hmm. Hmm. It's really, it's easy for us to do. So
Oh, it absolutely is.
yeah,
Absolutely is.
but it's
Um,
good stuff.
it
There's
is.
a lot here.
Oh, so
Um,
many things.
hmm. Hmm. And even and we can start wherever like where you want. So we're starting in 21, right? So
Correct. Yeah.
right off the bat, we're talking about that servant. And this was what I thought was cool, because how does this verse relate to the 10 commandments? Right,
Right?
right away we see, he shall serve, this slave or servant shall serve 6 years, and on the seventh go free. We go back to the fourth commandment. So
Yes.
they're all part of, like, bylaws of those 10.
Right. And that's what I was talking about whenever I mentioned, that sometimes it was to save the family. They would go into
Yeah.
this servanthood because they didn't have money or they didn't have land or they
Hmm.
whatever the situation was. Like it even discusses, and we're going to talk about this a little more later, but discusses, a father selling his daughter into servanthood and what that looks
Hmm.
like and all the rules around it. And it seems like sometimes we look at it so negatively
Right.
because we're looking at the surface of what's happening. But the truth is that when we look at that, we have to look at it as a protection.
Hmm.
It is protecting the girl
Hmm.
from being s- possibly starving to death
Yes.
or
Not
any
being able.
other, yeah, any other calamity
Absolutely.
that could come
Hmm.
upon the family.
Hmm.
It's possible that that is the only way to protect her. And he even goes further into the instructions for protecting her as
Exactly.
it talks about it.
Right. It's very, very interesting when you get past what's on the surface and you dig in and go to, because just like we have today, we have the poor, we have the middle class, and we have the rich. The poor don't want to be poor. The poor, but the rich get richer. It's just it's it's gone on since the time of Exodus and before. So you
Yes.
had a working class, you had slaves in Egypt, and you had the very rich who took advantage of them, who put them,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's true slavery. So they understood slavery. They understood what true slavery was about. And
Yes.
they're like, and God saying, no, you don't want to do that anymore. You don't want to go back to Egypt. And I don't want you to put other people in that position to go to become like Egyptian slaves.
Well,
So
and he
we have to keep
reminds
that in
them,
mind.
yes, he even reminds them in this passage, he reminds them about, don't forget that you were once this kind of a
Exactly.
person. You were once a sojourner. Don't forget
Yeah.
that.
Hmm. And I
Gives
still
us
tell people
perspective.
we're still sojourning.
Yes.
When we're grafted in to Israel, we are now the sojourners with them. We are part of their community.
Yes.
And I don't think we ever, you know, probably a lot of people watching get that, but there might be some who don't really get that we've been not only grafted in, not only does grafted in make us part of Israel spiritually, but we're like that sojourner. Now we are in covenant with them along with them under God. And
Right.
so yeah, so it's all part of this. So
It
how they
is.
all.
I was going to see, I don't think this is where it talks about the giving money. I think that's further down. Um, well, it talks about not charging interest,
Oh.
basically, for giving money to somebody. And I
Mm-hmm.
watched something, it was, you know, it was a coincidence that I came across this yesterday. Somebody was talking about how she and her husband had decided that if they made the choice to give someone money, they would never loan it, that they would just give it to them and never expect it back. And I thought, I would love to be in a place where I felt like I could do that. But also, when you're uh, putting that intention behind what you're doing, you're already setting yourself up for what that expectation is going to be in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not disappointed.
Hmm. Yeah. We were in a situation when we were doing some things around our property and our home, and a family wanted to, like, in a way, invest in what we were doing. So he wanted to help out. So he gave my husband a significant amount of money to invest in these things we were doing, and knowing that we weren't going to use them just for ourselves, we were going to use them in other ways to help other people. But then the time came a couple years later when they were facing hard times, and the Lord spoke to me and said, "This is what I want you to do for them." The first time they didn't ask for anything back. It was like, "This is just our we want to do this for you. We want to give you this amount of money to help you do what you're doing." But then the time came that the Lord said, "It's your turn to give to them." And that's exactly what we did. So there might and so I don't know if that applies to what you're saying, but when you think of not it may not loan money and charge interest, but you know what, be willing to give back when the time
Yes.
arises,
Well,
or
that's
if you
taking
have
care
that.
of each other, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what it comes down to is
Right.
We're still taking care of each other when we do that. And I'm going to give you an opposite example of your story, just so that you kind of get the feel for the intention behind what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
We had at one of the churches that I was in, way back when, there was a couple who made a lot of money, and they were tithers, and they gave a lot of money to the church,
Mm-hmm.
and they gave that money very well. I mean, for several months and months.
Mm-hmm.
And then they decided one day that they were going to have a meeting with the pastor, and basically had the pastor in his office and said, if you want these tithes to continue, then I want you to stop doing this and stop talking about that.
Yeah. Yep.
And
I
he
can
was like,
see.
no. But
Right.
it's
Yeah.
that intent behind it.
It is.
What's your heart? What does your heart look like in this situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's yeah. So we could go further, but
We could.
I'll just stop because I've known
Oh,
people like that too. So
right.
it's
Oh,
um if I could skip to even 21:16,
yeah.
and whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him shall be put to death. And this is kidnapping, and we don't often realize that even that goes back to the 10 commandments about stealing, because a lot of times the word stealing doesn't actually mean I stole your pencil or I stole your wallet, even though neither would be nice, or it still goes against the commandments, but it's stealing a human being from another, which is obviously way more serious. And um, that's just another example of how that goes back to the 10 Commandments. So,
Well, it's all about life.
hmm,
I mean,
it
it's about
is
the life
right.
the person has, the life the master has, the life that even later it
Hmm.
talks about, the life of the wife and the children of the servant,
Hmm.
and how that's going to play out as well.
Yeah,
But
right.
it's always about the life, and it's always good,
Hmm.
even when we don't understand it and we try to interpret it through modern eyes. It doesn't always work for us.
Hmm.
We have to be able to see it through that ancient Near East perspective,
Hmm.
and how they were living their lives, and the things that were in society in those days that were completely different than anything that we've experienced.
Right. And I heard Rabbi Foreman talk about how all these laws are based on their mistakes in the past.
Mm,
It's like the Lord just like been keeping record of what they've done, and He goes, "Okay, now let's talk about everything you guys have done since in all this time since creation." And so we need to set this straight and make some laws about what you do and don't do. And I thought that was good because some of these go back to Joseph, and
yes.
he describes in his videos how they go back to Joseph basically being kidnapped, and the son being taken away, Joseph being taken away as if he were miscarried.
Mhm.
It's very, very interesting. So if you don't know, if you're new to all of this, and you don't know, Rabbi David Foreman is on Aleph Beta, and does, and some videos you have to pay for, but there are some that you can get for free. But he goes into all the portions each week and explains, and there's a lot you can learn from him. So
He's an amazing teacher for sure.
yeah, I think most of us have used his stuff in one way or another.
Yes. One way or another. Yeah, I glean from him often.
Hmm. Hmm. And when I first had to start teaching this, I was really ignorant. I mean, honestly, the first time that somebody, it wasn't here, but it was at our in our congregation, and somebody, they were like, let's start teaching the Torah portions, and I'm like, okay, I gotta go learn these portions. I have to hurry and learn these because I gotta teach them. So Rabbi Foreman saved my butt. So
Yeah. Yeah, that and, sheepfold gleanings, that was
yeah.
one that I leaned on a lot too.
So yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
But it's all good stuff here. And I mean, and obviously the Holy Spirit can teach us and show us things that, because a lot of these, I even highlighted how many times you were put to death
Mm,
for what some of these laws. Death was a penalty for
right.
not obeying, not doing what you were supposed to do. And, um, but, but now, I mean, it's interesting because now even showing the difference between these laws written on stone and laws written on our heart, and that you know that parallel to the commandments, and now in the spirit, and a heart of flesh instead of a heart of stone. And just, I think it's just really cool how all that kind of goes together. It just overlaps and makes the meaning so much more spiritual or more understandable. And just like when Jesus taught, like you've heard it said, a life for a life, an eye for an eye, just what's in here, an eye for an
Right.
eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot. um that's in 21. And he goes, but that's not enough. It's about the heart. It's about the heart. And this is what's going to happen. This is what, it's not enough just to be unfaithful to your spouse. Lust is also that. It's not enough to, it's bad enough that you murder someone, but I'm telling you that anger is just as bad. I mean, so
Yeah.
the New
Kinda
Testament
filling in
builds.
gaps, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Filling in
Because
some
what
gaps in our
leads to
understanding.
murder? It's anger.
Yeah.
It's rage. And if you don't get that under control first, then what will be the result someday could be the result. you know
Correct. Yeah.
we had, I knew a couple. She came in, and she had a black eye, a bruise right here on her cheek. And laughingly, jokingly, I said, yeah, Mark, you need, kind of like, stop doing that kind of stuff. And they were just like, well, you know yeah, he
Yikes.
yeah. So there was an anger issue. And it wasn't as bad as it sounded, but it was a result of something else that caused that.
Mhm.
And but it was still out of anger. And so but it was just like, oh, so I guess I say all that because it's here, like, don't strike a man. But what leads to that point? Anger leads to that. And if
Right.
we don't get the anger under control, then this is the result.
If we don't learn
So
how to use our words.
yeah, and talk ourselves off the ledge.
Right?
Yeah,
I struggle with my words sometimes, so I understand.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it happens to the best of us, right? I mean,
Right?
yeah. You know what? And what really exposes us are children, right? I mean,
Yes.
children expose the worst of us. Isn't that awful? But
It's
it's
so
true.
true.
It's
Yes.
like I never thought I was like my mother until I had children, and I started treating my children like my mother treated me. And I'm like, what happened to me? Where
Yes.
did this come from? I don't know.
Yes.
But we're never quite, we don't really know until there's a trigger there that brings
Uh,
out that side of us that we didn't know existed. So
well, the thing that popped into my head when you brought up kids was I was at a wedding one time. My son was 3 or 4. He was old enough to say words very clearly. Of course, he used big words from the time he was little, but
I had one
he
like that.
we were at a wedding and he was just being just rambunctious and he wouldn't settle down. And I was like, if you don't stop, I'm going to take you in the bathroom. And he was like, okay. And he sits there for a second and then he starts and I was like, do you want to go to the bathroom? And he was like looking at me and he just kept on. So I picked him up. We're in a wedding. It's happening, right? I pick him up and I'm like, we're going to go in the bathroom. And he's yelling at the across the back of the church as we're walking out of the sanctuary, and he's like, "Don't bust me."
Don't beat me. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, "You act like like that. Yeah, you
I
act like I just do this all the time." And
I know, I know.
I
I
felt
have a friend who um she was in another country where where it was actually not only looked down on, but it could be punishable if you spanked your kids in public.
oh,
And someone was watching her. They were at a pool. The youngest one disobeyed. She picked her up to take her into the changing area, and a woman followed. And a woman came right in and said, "What are you going to do, that child?"
oh,
Yeah. And
wow.
so she was, I mean, so, there's that, people, yeah. So I've been in the situation where it's like, okay, we're going out to the car. No, I don't want to go out to the car. I don't want to go out, because stop it.
Yeah. And then we're embarrassed, and
Yeah,
really, I mean, it's just everybody
yeah,
knows. I mean,
yeah.
everybody is like, "Oh yeah,
Oh
I've
yeah.
been there."
And you feel like all the cameras are going to start following you to the car to see what you do to
Yes.
your kid.
Yes. Well,
Lady's
sometimes I
leaving.
think we need that.
Yeah.
It goes back to that
Oh,
anger issue, right?
yes, it does.
We're gonna make
Accountability.
sure. Yes. Yes. Oh, that's what this is all about, right?
Yes,
Is
it
being
is
accountable to each
accountability.
other.
Yeah, accountability. Because we get into laws of restitution, which is now accountability for your actions and how to pay someone back.
Right?
So, yeah.
Oh,
So,
and he goes
and I
into
even have written here how to treat your neighbor.
yes. It's so important that we understand what he's telling us and instructing us to do in this,
Hmm.
because because we may be the only light they see, and we may be the only one who really understands the instructions and is able to
Right.
carry this out to where it can make an impact on someone else who is outside the fold, if I could use that terminology. So
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
is tough.
There's some good comments here too, if you've seen the chat at
I
all.
have
So thank
not.
you. So yeah, someone, Victoria, don't bust me. So funny.
Yes.
So yeah, so
Oh my
good
word.
comment. Um, so what else here? So I'll just show another one that goes along with the commandments, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Um, 22:20, whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. Of course, that goes under the first commandment there. Have no other
Mhm.
gods before me.
Yes.
Um, Number 21, verse 21, you shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners, like you talked about, in the
Mhm.
land of Egypt. You brought that up. You shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. And that goes back to number 9, because, and I have to go back because I have all these notes written, but you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. It actually was the same word used there as mistreat.
Wow.
So you're mistreating someone when you bear false witness against them. And so this one in 21 or 22, 21, and 22 goes with the ninth commandment. So
Yes.
I thought that was interesting. I don't know if anybody else does, but I found it interesting how there's those parallels, and I that's what I really enjoy about studying the word.
Yes.
Um, 23:1, you shall not spread false report. That goes with commandment number 3, actually. Um, and that is, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And so when you think about how that is, because it's not about cussing, right?
Right.
It's not about using Jesus Christ as a, you know, even though that's not good.
We're not promoting that.
Yes, not good. Um, but it's more about it's basically it taking a vow, a wrong vow, and not following through with that vow. But it's also, if I understand, it's actually about identity.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
about
It's like us as
defaming
women.
someone's identity.
Yes. Well, it's like us as women getting married to someone and we take that man's last name.
Yes.
We are now representing that family. What's the same thing? We don't want to
Yes.
take the name of the Lord God in vain. We don't want to take it and claim that we are his and that we are walking in his
Right.
promises and all of and doing his work when we're not representing him well.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a good example. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um,
Were there more?
you just find it again, number 10, verse 10. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Chapter 23, verse 10. For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in the field, but the seventh, of course, that goes back to keeping the seventh holy.
Mhm.
So those are the ones I found right off the bat that I without like going deeper. But I think, yeah, even 13, 20, 23, 13. Pay attention to all I have said to you, and make no mention of the names of other gods, nor let it be heard on your lips.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think even that one we have to be careful of. That
Yeah.
I think just I can't think of a really good situation. Maybe you can, but where we might bring glory to something of the world
Right.
that is that goes against God, that stands against the Lord, which I'm sure we can think of a lot of things. I
Well,
mean,
the thing
really.
that popped in my head, I'm not looking at anybody. I can't see anybody, okay? But the thing that popped in my head was when we're like, "Oh, have you seen such and such show?"
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what
Or
popped in
I
my
mean,
head.
yeah, no. I remember, I mean, I stopped watching awards shows years and years ago because
Mhm,
I got so tired of them. I mean, as a teenager, I thought they were kind of cool, and probably
mhm.
college, but then I don't know. I just figured out that I didn't need anything to do with that, because what are we doing? We're comparing ourselves. And even I know of other people who said, "Well, I just like to watch them to see all their dresses and to see the way they glam up and stuff." And but yeah, but we're making a god of that. We're
Yes.
making this glamorous, yeah,
Lifestyle. Yeah.
yeah. And
Well,
it's
and
easy.
comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes. Yeah. So, and they are gods whether we want to admit it or not. Not all the gods we have are some kind of, okay, I'm going to show you something my son brought back from Egypt, but not all gods look like this.
Right.
He got this because it's actually um the uh the gold, the stone he bought it for that reason,
Oh,
the lapis.
uh-huh.
But yeah, but that I'm always kind of like leery, do I keep something like this, because what do I
Right.
do, with it? That's my issue, I guess. I need to figure out what to do with that. So but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but our gods don't look like this today, right? Our gods,
Right.
our gods,
They look like
they,
this.
yeah, yeah,
Or the
yeah.
TV or whatever,
They can
whatever it
be our
is.
children. They can be our spouse. They can be.
Absolutely.
They can be. What do you idolize? What is so important to you? I mean, I'm kind of a health nut, a little bit of a health nut. I enjoy eating healthy. So let's just say it that way. But sometimes I talk to people, and maybe I'm just offering a little bit of advice, or they're coming to me for advice, like how do I get healthier or whatever. And it's like, well, you need to give up certain things, or maybe stop eating fast food and that kind of thing. And they're like, oh, I'm not changing the way I eat.
That
um
sounds parallel to a story I've read in the Bible somewhere. Hmm. Sorry.
but no, but you're right, though. When I'm not changing my diet, I am not giving up all the foods that I love. that really starts crossing into idolatry, because
Yeah.
when we care more about what goes in instead of the result of what it does, you know, we are a temple. And I still feel like being a temple, we're still under a requirement of taking care of that temple, just like they had to take care of the temple. They couldn't allow the temple, and that's a copy and a shadow of what we are today. They weren't allowed to let the temple go into ruin. They weren't
Mhm.
allowed to abuse. They had to take care of everything. It was holy. It was God's.
Mhm.
Nothing we have is ours. And that's what all this is saying. It's not yours. It's actually all mine. That neighbor is mine. That I created that person. You take care of
Yes.
them. You treat them properly. Those animals I gave you, I created them. They're mine. You take care of them, and if you're taking care of somebody else's, you take care of them properly. you know
Yes.
you make restitution for your mistakes, because I will make restitution for all of your mistakes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I read that, it's like,
There's
that's what
Jesus
he's
right there,
doing.
right?
Uh-huh.
Oh,
He's the ultimate. He will make restitution for all things. I have a great book here. Can I just I'm
yeah.
reading this book, The Restitution of All Things. It's a restoration. He is
Mm,
making restoration. That's what he's doing. That's what
right.
he's been doing
If I
since
could,
the cross.
let me share. Can I share something
Sorry.
personal? No, no,
Just
no. It's fine.
getting off on a
You got all
tangent.
excited, right?
I'm preaching.
It reminded me, I had wanted to share this and I wasn't sure if it was, there was going to have an opportunity.
Hmm.
But since you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I need to talk about this. So,
Good.
um, I had a very traumatic childhood.
Mm,
And so there was one particular instance when the abuse started that was so traumatic that I
mm,
dissociated to the point of being able to watch this happen from the corner of the room to me.
mm,
And so I I was struggling with forgiveness and I was trying to get through that.
mm-hmm,
And I just felt like that the Lord just showed me. I would have to explain how everything was set up in this memory, but the Lord just
I
showed
understand.
me that He was in the corner weeping
Mm,
as I was experiencing this because He wanted me to know that
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
That He knew how hard it was, that He knew the repercussions, and
right.
that He's not going to interfere with someone else's will, but it's all going to be for His glory,
Mm-hmm,
those things that I experienced. And I want to help other women who have
mm-hmm,
walked through these things. And I always remind them he was still there. He was still there. He's even making the restitution for them,
right. Right.
not just for us.
Absolutely. And I think it's important in how we word things, because obviously, if you're a victim and I come to you and go, oh, well, the Lord's working it all out, you know, he's going to use it all for good. And you're like, that's nice to know, but how does that help me? I mean,
Yes.
how does that help me? Because I feel like
Yes.
crap. So we have to be careful not to use that kind of, it's different when it comes from you, and it's a revelation to
Right.
you from the Lord,
Right. But
because
we don't
he's
want to
the
be
one. Yeah.
patronizing with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But we, as somebody, has to be careful, because I knew someone who went through a lot of abuse, and people would always, that was the pat phrase they use, like,
Mm,
God's going to use it for good. And she's like, oh, nice, thank you very much, I'm glad.
right.
And but it didn't make her feel better. It didn't make her feel like less than a victim.
Mm,
And
right.
so just having said that, I think it's really only the Lord can put it that way to
Yes.
us,
Yes. Agreed. Yes.
because it makes perfect sense when he says it, but not necessarily when it comes out of our mouth, because we're not in the position to make good from it.
Right. Right.
So we have to be careful. But you're right. I mean, Yeah. And I've known other people like that have shared a similar story. They had a vision of the Lord showing. I mean, I have a good friend who shares this story all the time, but she's like, Lord, where were you when I was, you know, in this oh, she was like, I don't know if she was premature, but she was in the kind of like the incubator, type of thing.
Yeah.
What's it called? Isolate. And she was in that, and she just said, where were you when I was in there all alone, and she just saw suddenly this picture of Jesus in there with her. And and she goes, I can't even tell you. She goes, I kind of laughed, but yet I was like, you were right there with me. You were right in there with me,
Yeah.
a child, a baby. And I think that I've heard other people say similar things, that it's really, really comforting and healing when you realize that Jesus is in that room with you.
Yes. Yes.
And
Very
that's
much
true though
so.
for all of us.
Yes, for sure.
In our worst times, he's there helping us. So
Yes. Agreed.
um the last thing that I really enjoy about this chapter, or this portion, besides the covenant and everything, but there's basically chapter 23 and parts of 24, but the very end there, or near the end of 23, where it starts in 20. Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place I have prepared. And then 21. So I'm in 23, 21. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression. So, for my name is in him, and that's the key. So who are we talking about? Yeshua. And
Yes.
I was telling Charlie before we got on, like, I had this 20-minute conversation with this woman today, and I got on kind of all excited, and she's sick, and I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry you're sick. Can I tell you something really happened good? I'm like, I don't want to take away from you being sick, but it was just it was just the coolest thing, because I was explaining some of these things. Do you know this was Yeshua right here? This is Jesus. And headlights, like eyes in headlights. She's like, where do you get that? Where do you get that? And how do you know that? And I'm telling her about, Genesis, and who was it that set the Sabbath in motion? Who was it that rested on the same day? It was on that seventh day. It was Yeshua.
Yes.
And she goes, how do you know? And I said, well, in the Aramaic, it said the word of the Lord rested. The word of the Lord created. The word of the Lord did this and did that. And I said, it's all Yeshua. He's the one with legs who walked through the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. And it's so amazing, because I think when the first time I read this and learned that this was Yeshua, I understood it. It's like, he
What?
took different forms, but yet he was still there.
Yes.
He was always there with them. In all these major events, he was there, just like you described. In their
Yes.
good times and their bad times, he was there in one form or another, whether it was a fire, whether it was a burning bush, because he was all those forms.
Right.
He was all that and more.
Well, and I see when you read this, all I could think of was my sheep know my voice.
Yeah.
Listen to him if you truly obey his voice and do all that I say. And
Hmm.
I'm like, yes, because we know his voice, but we can't know
Hmm.
his voice if we don't know him, if we're not spending time getting to know him in our word and
Yes.
understanding what he's trying to say and not just what we think about what he says.
Right. Right. And and even when, again, here we go back. Now, I saw somebody said they like chiasms, and I do too. I think it just takes a special kind of nerd to like these kinds of things. So, and I am that nerd. So, but when you get into 24, again, you have verse 15, when Moses went up on the mountain and the cloud covered the mountain, the glory of the Lord dwelt on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered for 6 days. And on the seventh, he called Moses out of the midst of the cloud. And so there again, we see that he is so consistent, so
Mhm.
faithful with 6 days and the seventh day. We see that throughout scripture. But this in 24 is a beginning of a chiasm. And that what I just read was the A part of the chiasm. And I have it all in my Bible, but where B and C and then where it goes back to A B and
Mhm.
B A I should say, but it's very interesting, um, where all how all this plays together. And I think if I can tell you just one thing, it goes from 24. This particular chiasm goes from chapter 24, I think, to getting there all the way to like 39 or 40. Let me see.
Oh, wow.
Oh, all the way to the end. So
Oh.
here it is again in 40,
Mhm.
34. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting. The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, and Moses was not able to enter the tent of meeting. So you have these same, the cloud covering the mountain. So you have
Mhm.
A beginning in 24:15, and you have A ending in 40:34.
That
So that's the
is
beginning and the end of this particular chiasm.
that
So
is
I thought that
awesome.
was significant, I guess.
It is, it is. Uh, and for those of you who don't understand what a chiasm is, it is a if you look at my favorite example is a menorah. So consider these two as one, okay? If I have a menorah and it
Mm-hmm.
has 7 branches, so I've got 6, 7, okay? If I took this menorah and folded on itself, then this relates to this relates to this relates to this, and then this is the center.
Mm-hmm. So you have
And
A's, B's, C's, and then the D.
yes, and that's the focus. That's the
Yeah, the
focus of the
treasure.
chiasm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, it is the honor of kings to seek out the secret, right?
Mm-hmm. So that's what I just pointed out. So you have, and if you ever read like even like parts of the story of Noah, I had a friend call and or text me and said, "Why do they keep repeating these things?" And I'm like, "It's a chiasm." And then she's like, "Oh, I should have known that." And so then I just walked her through it, and she saw them then right away because she knew what a chiasm was, but but often people ask you like, "Why is this repeated?" And then it doesn't dawn on you until somebody else says it, and that's all that
Yeah.
happened. But yeah, so it's like when things keep getting repeated, more than likely they're chiasm, and you see the different parts of the chiasm in those repetitious sentences and verses. So,
Yes, and he speaks to us through them and has there's a point.
hmm
There's a point. It's right here.
hmm and the first one we come across is in the creation story. The creation story is a chiasm. It
Yes.
has the A, the last part, the two A's, which are the bookends,
Mhm.
and then you have the parts that kind of go lead to the center, and it's very interesting. And I won't go into all that because we just
Right.
because it's just a complete tangent. So,
Well, I was really, um, I don't know how to explain it because this it's going to sound bad, but when I got to chapter 24,
mhm,
when as I read this several times in the last week, when I got to chapter 24, every time it was like this relief. It was
mhm,
like this peace, and I was like, what is going on here? And really, it goes back to how you're viewing what his instructions are. Are you
yeah,
viewing them as judgment or are you viewing them as instruction?
right,
This is the Father explaining to us what we need to do and how we are to behave so that we can be good representatives of his name. So
mhm,
when I got to
absolutely.
chapter 24, I was like, Now, I'm not going to share this story, but I did see in the chat that Charlie shared a couple of previous years' teachings on this.
Hmm.
And I don't know which year it is. Charlie, if you do, you might tell us. But there was one year that Brenda told the story about the worm in Isaiah 66. I cannot remember if it was this portion or if it was a different one. but it is worth listening to. Um, I know that Isaiah 66 was also on a different scripture reading in Genesis 2 years ago. So it may not
Mm,
be this same one, but it was very interesting. And I wanted to, if you guys read all of the scriptures that I laid out, I just wanted to point out something that I thought was interesting. And that was that in Isaiah 66, it mentions um, the worm that never dies. And it also mentions it in the scripture in Mark. And so, what I wanted to bring about that was just that there are things, again, I have to go back to that ancient Near East perspective and society as a whole and not understanding everything that it's talking about. Because as I searched for meaning in that particular phrase, even, there's not a lot of information there.
mm,
What does it mean? A lot of people referred to it and said it was a maggot, and then others referred to it and said, no, it's the blood worm, the red worm, the mother, which I'm not going to even try to tell the story because Brenda did an amazing job doing it. But it is just, I want you to not be afraid to ask questions and don't be afraid to say you don't know. We don't have to know it all. We can search out the things that we can
mhm,
search out,
mhm,
and it's okay to relax a little bit and be okay with not knowing everything,
mhm.
um, because there's a lot to know, and the more I learn, the more I realize I don't have a clue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It funny kind of little story, and I don't tell it. I'm gonna tell it to like I don't know how many people are here, but just don't take it as me being boastful. Please don't take it that way because that's not how it's intended. But I have to explain. When the Lord was teaching me stuff like this in his word, 10, 15 years ago, um and I was explaining it to people who had no idea, like the Hebrew roots of Christianity, the Jewishness of the scriptures, even the Jewishness of Jesus. I mean, we didn't hear about that much either. But the Lord was starting to reveal things like this to me because I was really interested in the Old Testament and really interested in understanding word studies. I loved word studies, but I kind of was like, um, you know, I kind of felt like I knew more than most people. Even sometimes, I knew I would sit and listen to my pastor explain something and think that is not what that means. That is not what that means at all. And so, but then I come into this community and I remember the Rooted Cafe and when it was going on the way it was, and I was just getting into it, and I'm like going to my husband, it's like, I know nothing now. I know absolutely nothing. It's like the things I say, people are like, oh, that's so 20 years ago. I learned that 20 years ago, or whatever. And I'm just like, I'm the dumb one now. I have to relearn everything. I have to relearn everything, Mike.
I have had that
And
exact
and
experience.
it was hard. It was really hard because I was used to knowing a little bit more, and I know,
Right.
and maybe it went to my head at times, but the Lord brought me back down and said, "No, you know nothing. So you don't know as much as you think you know." So it was a good experience to learn, and I
Yes.
never thought I'd be on this, Charlie. I never thought I would be doing this because I thought it's going to be years before I get caught up with everybody else, and to be put on in a position where I'm here with you and I've been on with Brenda and I've been on with Charlie, I feel like very intimidated, like
A little
I
imposter
don't know what
syndrome,
you know.
maybe.
Hmm?
A little imposter syndrome, maybe.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
always what I'm dealing with. But
I know, I know. I've never called it that, and I appreciate that because I do get it. I understand it perfectly, but it was more of just in my words. I was just said I don't know anything. I just don't
right.
know anything. Why
Well,
am I on here?
we are running out of time,
Yes,
so
we
I
are.
would like to pray before we head out, if that's all right with you.
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
Father, you are so good. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to gather together and break the bread of your word. Father, I love how you reveal yourself to us. I love how you come in and you just dwell with us to show us who you are. I am thankful for your word that you have given it to us, that we can hold it in our hand to understand who you are and your purposes and intentions for us. I thank you for being a good father. I am blessed. I am blessed to know the truth of who you are. And I ask that you would help each of us to be a tool in your hands if there are others in our lives who need that reminder of who you are and what you have done. I ask that you would help us to submit to that and do the work that you have intentioned for us. Thank you for this time together. Bless everyone that is doing prep right now and getting ready for your Shabbat tomorrow. And bless this time, this weekend, and keep everyone safe. In the name of Yeshua. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thanks, ladies. I appreciate it. I'm so glad you were here.
Yes, thank you.
And we have some ladies